So as you know, I've been working through a little 4-part mini-series, and I'm on number 4 today. Hooray! And I call it the Gospel according to Ezekiel. It's really incredible. I think you can take any book in the Old Testament and you can find the Gospel in it. And I've sort of focused in on probably one of the hardest books in the Bible, and an obscure passage. But hopefully we've got something out of it. And the passage is at the start of the book, where we meet this guy, Ezekiel, this young prophet priest. He was 30 years old, about my age, and he was sat by the banks of the river Kibar in what is today Iraq. At the beginning of the 6th century BC. Ezekiel is there with his wife, he's there with members of his community, and they've been taken into exile. They've essentially been made refugees, and they're trying to eke out, as a displaced people, they're trying to eke out a new existence. Not too dissimilar to millions of Ukrainians that are facing displacement. Something that's been happening, hasn't it, throughout history. And these Jewish people they've been forced to leave their homelands, and the kingdom of Judah is within a few years going to fall. And it's at this moment of impending national tragedy that Ezekiel has a vision of the glory of God. And the year was 593 BC. And as part of his vision, he sees these 4 creatures who are cherubim. What are cherubim? Angels. And they have 4 faces. And what I've been trying to suggest to you over these last few times I've spoken is that each of these faces has some aspect in them, reflected in them, concerning the coming of the Messiah, the coming of God's glory to the world in the person of Jesus Christ. And there were 4 faces, and what were they?
Eagle.
Well done, Athena. An ox, a lion, and a man. A man. Well done, you were listening. And what I've tried to point out to you is that the keys to understanding each of these faces are actually found within the later chapters of Ezekiel. So there's a whole chapter about eagles, there's a whole chapter about lions. And last time I spoke, I tried to show you that this imagery where Ezekiel's on his sides, remember we had a river up here with this iron pan upon him, was prefiguring the coming of Christ, the suffering servant, the one who would bear the sin of the world like a beast of burden, like an ox. And so I've only got one left, and it's the face of a man. Can we find and unlock the meaning of what this face is all about in the book of Ezekiel, in the later chapters? Yes, we can. So after Ezekiel's initial visions of God's glory in 593 and of the cherubim, 1 year later we're told in Ezekiel 3 that the hand of the Lord came upon him again. And this time he is taken, supernaturally transported from Kibar to Jerusalem. Supernaturally transported in the Spirit. And he's taken to the temple, and what he sees in the temple is a real shock, because he finds that the temple had been turned into a place of idolatry. And it's described in Ezekiel 8, and it makes quite painful reading. In the place that was designed to be the place where the people of Israel encountered the presence of God. And once a year, the high priest would go in and make atonement for the people of Israel and encounter God's glory. There were now idols. There were Egyptian idols, there were Babylonian idols, there were Assyrian idols, and lots of other stuff was going on. And it was basically horrific. It was horrific. This was a place that God had said, my name will always be there, and it had been turned into a centre of idolatry in the very temple itself. And after Ezekiel has this vision and this tour, if you like, of the temple, he hears this voice, and it says this in Ezekiel 9, bring near those who are appointed to execute judgment on the city, each with a weapon in his hands. And I saw 6 men coming from the direction of the upper gate, which faces north, each with a deadly weapon in his hand. With them was a man. Everyone say man. With them was a man who was clothed in linen and had a writing kit at his side. They came and stood beside the bronze altar. Because of this sin of idolatry, a day of judgment had arrived. And it's in this moment that we meet this man clothed in linen. This mysterious man. And the crazy thing is, as you go through the book of Ezekiel, keep on meeting this man clothed with linen. And later at the end of Ezekiel, this man gives Ezekiel a tour around this vision of a temple. But we're going to look where he appears again in Ezekiel 10, verse 1. I looked, and I saw the likeness of a throne of lapis lazuli. Is that how you say that? Lazuli. That's how we say it in Cornwall. Lazuli. Above the vault that was over the heads of the cherubim, the Lord said to the man clothed in linen, go in among the wheels beneath the cherubim, fill your hands with burning coals from among the cherubim and scatter them over the city. And as I watched, he went in. So get this, Ezekiel sees the throne of God. He sees the throne of Yahweh, the same throne that Isaiah saw when he saw the Lord high and lifted up. He sees a heavenly vault below the throne. He sees the cherubim beneath the vaults. And he sees these crazy wheels which were high and awesome, sparkling like chrysolites and full of eyes. I love that. Full of eyes. And there is this man there. And he's clearly described as a man, which Piper in the Hebrew is? Come on, Piper. Ish. Who said ish? It's ish. Everyone say ish. Well done, you speak Hebrew. It's clearly identified as a man, and he goes into the wheels and fills his hands with burning coals. But how is he dressed, and why is it important? How is he dressed? In linen. And why is that important? Yeah? Who said that? Oh, it's me. You've been listening to your dad. That's what the priests of the Old Testament used to wear. They used to be dressed in linen garments. Aaron and his sons had to wear linen. And it was the clothing of the priests. You can go and look it up. But more than that, he was doing something priestly. This man was doing something priestly. And what we have to understand is that because the idolatry that was happening in the temple, because of that idolatry, God had decided to move out. He was moving out. He was moving out of Jerusalem. And I know this is like a strange concept for us. in this modern world, but for the ancient Jew, the ancient Israelite, it was a familiar idea. And if you think about it, in the wilderness wanderings, God was constantly on the move, wasn't he? Yeah. How did he move around? In a cloud of smoke, and by day, and a pillar of fire by night. God was always on the move, and when the Lord began to move, the Israelites had to pack up their tents, and they had to follow the cloud and follow the pillar of fire. And then when the pillar of fire stopped, or the cloud stopped, what did? They set up camp, they put the tabernacle up, and that would be the place where they could meet with God again. He was constantly on the move. And here in this moment, God is so sick of the idolatry that he decides to leave Jerusalem. The glory begins to move. And what this guy is doing, he's going into these amazing wheels, and he's taking these coals and he's throwing the coals upon the city to create the smoke to shield the glory of God as it left the city. And that's what the high priest did when he went into the most holy place to make atonement for the people of Israel. Are you getting this? Stick with. That's what Jess would say, something like that. Bear with. Bear with. Listen to what the high priest used to do. He used to take a censer full of burning coals, the exact same word in the Hebrew that's used in Ezekiel. From the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of finely ground fragrant incense, take them behind the curtain. He is to put the incense on the fire before the Lord, and the smoke of the incense will conceal the atonement cover, which was where the glory of the Lord appeared, above the tablets of the covenant law. Listen to this, so that he would not die. Yeah. Yikes! Are you getting this? The high priest was shielding the glory of God with the smoke from a censer full of burning coals. And the man in Ezekiel's vision is described as a heavenly priest, I'm suggesting. And I think that's why the face of a man is on the cherubim. It's speaking of this coming heavenly priest, the coming Jesus, Yeshua. And they're not just pointing towards a coming prophet, what were the other ones? Prophets, king, suffering servants. These faces were also pointing towards a coming priest. This is the one who would, after his death, Jesus, go into the presence of God and make atonement for the sins of the world through the sprinkling of his own blood. Jesus, our high priest. Hebrews 4. Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has ascended into heaven, Jesus, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. This is one of the great truths of the Old Testament. God was sending a king into the world, yes, but he was sending a king who was a priest. Isn't that awesome? The heavenly man. He appears all throughout the Old Testament. Pre-visions, if you like, of Jesus before he came as a baby. And the fact is, he is seen by Ezekiel in the very presence of God. And this is the one who took on our humanity to be the one who would mediate a way for us to go back to God. As it says in 1 Timothy 2 verse 5, for there is one God and one mediator between God and mankind, the man Jesus Christ. Are you getting this? Humanity needed a way back to God. And it needed to be a living, breathing, thinking, feeling human being to do it. We needed someone like us. Someone like us. Like it said in the book of Hebrews, someone who could empathize with our weaknesses. Someone who suffered when he was tempted. Someone who shared in our humanity and could represent us before God as a representative of a human being, but who is without sin. Jesus, our high priest. We should get excited about this. He went ahead of us to make a way for us so that we could go back to God. He shed his own blood so that we can enter into the very presence of God through Jesus, our high priest. And if that isn't enough, look at what he's doing as he scatters the coals to shield the glory. It's saying something about Jesus' priestly ministry on earth, that it would be he who would be the one to shield the glory of God in his very humanity. In his very humanity, he took, if you like, he took on the curtain of the flesh to contain the fullness of God's glory, and would spend his ministry giving glimpses of the glory of God away wherever he went. Is that not true? The glory of God was no longer in a building. It was no longer in the wilderness. It was no longer on the top of a smoking mountain. But it was still moving around, now hidden away in the human life of Jesus. The glory of God in a man. The Word became flesh and he made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The eternal Word became flesh, and they'd seen his glory because they walked with him. And of course, when Jesus came out of the wilderness, he performed his miracle in Cana of Galilee. What was the first miracle? Water into wine, which I've suggested before prefigures his ultimate coming. But look at what it says in John 3 verse 11. What Jesus did here in Cana of Galilee was the first of the signs through which he revealed his glory. And his disciples believed in him. When he's on the mountaintop, later, much later, about 8 days after Jesus said this, he took Peter and John and James with him, and he went up into a mountain to pray. As he was praying, the appearance of his face changed and his clothes became as bright as a flash of lightning. Jesus spent his life revealing the glory of God. Isn't that awesome? That's what Jesus came to do. He came to reveal the glory to those who believed in him, followed him, and sought after him. Could I leave you with one more little snippet? Little gem for you. I'll risk it. When Ezekiel had his first vision of the glory of God on the 5th of Tammuz in 593, 7 days later he had another. And we're told in Ezekiel 3 that the hand of the Lord came on him again. And the Lord says to him in verse 22 and 23, "Get up, go out to the plain, and there I will speak to you." So I got up and went out into the plain, and the glory of the Lord was standing there. Like the glory that I'd seen by the Kibar River. And what does he do when he sees the glory of God? The same thing we would do if the glory of God showed up right now. He fell face down. He fell face down. And it describes that he went out into this plain. And there's a lot of speculation about where this was, that this took place, where Ezekiel saw the glory of God. We know that it's somewhere in Babylonia because he was back with the exiles when God speaks to him. But let me just share this with you as an interesting little thought. It might be my last bit of history you do a comparative study of Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, you find out this amazing thing. And you'll find out that in the year that Ezekiel had his vision of the glory of God, when he was told to go out on the plane in Spain, wasn't in Spain. When he's told to go out onto the plain where he sees the glory of God standing there, I love that, something else was happening in the ancient world. It was a big thing. And there's archaeological evidence to prove it. So Ezekiel's having his vision. At the same time, something crazy was happening in the ancient world. Aren't you glad you came to church?
Yeah.
Woohoo! History! What was it? No. Look, meteor shower's a good guess. God bound. You get theology awards or something. History awards. I'll read it to you. King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high, 6 cubits wide, and he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Get this. We know the story, don't we? Nebuchadnezzar built this big statue, and he actually called all the kings of all the kingdoms that he ruled over, which is basically the whole of the Middle East and beyond. And they all had to travel to Babylon to confess allegiance to him and to bow down to this big statue. Zedekiah, the last king of Judah, he traveled there. Meshach, Abednego, and Shadrach. They were there. And in fact, their names, those 3 names, are found on a clay prison, on a list of the names of people that were in attendance at this mighty gathering. And all of these kingdoms, Nebuchadnezzar's great empire, had all gathered together. Nothing like this had ever happened before. It was like a G40. It was like a G40. Everybody was there. Where? On the plain of Dura. Could it be that the very place and in the very year that all the glories of the ancient kingdoms of the world were gathered together in this great act of idolatry, at that moment Ezekiel also sees the glory of God? Isn't that a good thought? It was this glory that these 3 young Jewish men knew something about. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I'm finishing. But they tasted something of the glory of God, and they said, we will not bow down to the statue. We will not bow down because we've seen the true glory. They wouldn't bow down. And that statue must have just looked like cheap shine in comparison to the glory of God. And as a result, they get thrown into the fire. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th one looks like the son of the gods. Are you getting this? We've just met a man who could walk in the fire and carry fiery coals in his hands, and here he is again walking in the fire with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It's Jesus! He's so cool! The glory of God far outshining the power and the wealth and the pomp and the pride of this world in the man Jesus Christ. That's why I love your song, Josh Weed. It's a great song. I've been listening to it. It sounds irreligious, I know. So just want this compared to Jesus. There's nothing. Not even weed. It's got to be said. It's better than anything else. And this is, for me, the gospel according to Ezekiel. that just like those young men, Ezekiel had seen a better kingdom. He'd seen a better kingdom, and he understood that the glory of God was on its way to the world in the form of a man. In the form of a man, not a building, not a statue, nothing else, but in a man, in an ish. Everyone say ish. Ish. This man would be a king. He would be the Lion of Judah. This man would be a prophet, the prophet who was promised from Deuteronomy 18, verse 18. This man would be a sacrifice who would, through his own death, buy us back from death. And this man would be a high priest, our representative before God, making atonement for us, carrying the glory, fulfilling all of the ancient promises that we read in the Old Testament, bringing about an end to sin, an end to the wall between God and humanity. I'm out of breath. He would be a walking, talking, there's a song somewhere, walking, talking, breathing vessel of the glory of God. Isn't that awesome? This is my last thought, I promise. Because of Jesus, we get to be walking, talking, breathing vessels of the glory of God. I'm telling you the truth. We've got the same vessel. We've got the same vessel he had, arms and legs and bodies. The container for the glory of God. Sorry, my voice is going. We get to share in his glory. We get to carry it and make it known to the world. We have this treasure in jars of clay. His glory in us. You too have a priestly role. You are priests. The priesthood of all believers. We are all priests. We are all called into that role to go into the presence of God on behalf of our fellow human beings, to make intercession, to represent them, to appeal for them, and then go to be God's messengers, and Rob said it, and ambassadors to the world, carrying the glory we got in his presence. Amen. Seek his glory. Take hold of his glory like those coals with both hands, carry it out into the world to give it away wherever you go. I think that's the Great Commission. I think that's what we're called to do. To go and give glimpses of Jesus wherever we go. To reveal him. Amen?
You love me till